Now, this video is probably going to be one of my biggest FPL videos ever. We're going to look at all the stats and all the data that you need to know from the season so far. A couple of things before we get into the video. I'm going to split it into two. So first of all, we're going to look at some team stats rather than individual players. And then next up, of course, we're going to look into some individual player stats. Second, I just wanted to say, if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the Golden Goal channel. I still think 75% of people that are watching this channel at the moment are not subscribed. So I'd really appreciate it if you could do that, particularly if you enjoy this video. So starting off with some of the team stats then, this data comes from Understat.com. I find Understat a really useful tool basically for looking at the teams in the Premier League. So what we've got here is a ranking of teams for goals against their expected goals against. Obviously, goals against is just a raw, how many times does the ball cross the goal line, where expected goals against is basically the quality of chances that they've conceded in the league so far this season, and on average, how many goals should come from that quality of chances they've conceded. I think that's my best definition of what expected goals against is. And you can see here the top teams, the best teams that have conceded the fewest goals: Liverpool, Forest, Newcastle, Man United and Arsenal. You can see there's a whole bunch of teams there around 13, 15, 17 as well. How does that compare expected goals against wise? Well, Liverpool and Forest are both massively outperforming their expected goals against numbers. So yeah, just something I think useful to look at. Man United as well conceded only 12 goals, but only 12 goals from 19.14 expected goals against. So that suggests that in quite a lot of cases, the goalkeeper is performing really well. So Liverpool obviously has Alisson. Nottingham Forest has Sells, who's obviously performed really well this season. And Man United have Onana. You can see the rest of the teams, Chelsea are actually quite overperforming it as well. There aren't actually all that many underperformers at the moment in the league, which is interesting to see. So first, yeah, the best defenders in the league we're looking at here for goals against. And we'll turn the table and have a look at the worst defences next. You can see here Wolves, Ipswich, Brentford, Leicester, Southampton and West Ham. Wolves have conceded 27 goals in the Premier League so far this season. Ipswich have conceded 22, Brentford 22, Leicester 21, Southampton 21 as well. For expected goals conceded, Ipswich are actually the worst team, followed by Leicester, Southampton and Wolves. So for looking at teams to target, I probably bear those two things in mind. So you've got Wolves, Ipswich and Brentford there have conceded the most. And well, largely they've also got the biggest expected goals against as well. So yeah, the worst defenders in the league here and the teams kind of to target. And we'll do the same now for the attacks. So the leading team in the league for goals scored is Tottenham. They scored 23 goals. Man City and Brentford both on 22. Liverpool, Chelsea on 21. 19 for Brighton. 18, you can see the rest of the teams there. How does that stack up? Well, in terms of who are the best attacks ranked by XG, Liverpool are actually the best attack for XG. They put up 24.62 XG. Man City, 23. Tottenham, 23. Arsenal and Fulham actually in 5th place, which is a little bit of a surprise to me. Fulham are the 5th best team in the league for expected goals so far this season. So yeah, this is just a view basically of the teams you might want to target to put in your team and players you might want to pick from basically. And then next up, we've got the worst attacks, so the teams that score the fewest goals. I'd probably suggest these are teams with players you should probably avoid picking because they don't create all that many chances. So Southampton have only scored 7 goals. Palace have only scored 8. Everton have scored 10. Yeah, that's less than 1 goal per game. You've played 11 games, of course, now in the league so far this season. And yeah, Southampton, Palace and Everton have scored less than 1 goal per game. In terms of expected goals, though, the lowest team for total expected goals so far is actually Wolves, followed by Everton, Ipswich, Leicester and then Southampton. So if you're looking to pick defenders in your FPL team potentially, targeting defenders who play the worst attacks in the league with their fixtures is a smart way to do it, because obviously that means they've got greater chances of keeping clean sheets. So yeah, just some useful team data there based on actual goals, expected goals and the same for goals against to give you an idea of who have performed the best in the league so far this season and who haven't. Right, on to some data surrounding the players now, and I'm going to start off a little bit boring by just going through who has scored the most points in each position. Now, you can just easily do this yourself on the FPL website, right? Rank players by their total points. So, this isn't particularly scientific, but knowing who are the top scorers in each position is useful. I'll reel through, say, the top 4 in each position. So, right now, Onana is the top scoring goalkeeper, followed by Sales, Pickford, and Rob Sanchez of Chelsea. Virgil van Dijk is the top scoring defender in the game, followed by Guardiola, Ola Aina of Nottingham Forest, and Trent. Mo Salah, Palmer, and Mbeumo and Saka are the 4 top scoring midfielders, closely followed, to be fair, by Luis Diaz. Haaland is the top scoring forward, closely followed by Chris Wood, Welbeck, Jackson, and Cunha. So, as a view of total points so far, this is how they're looking in each position. I also thought another useful stat is points per million, so how much value these players are providing in your team. Obviously, total points is one metric, but, how valuable these players are is also quite useful, I think. And again, I'll go through the top 4 or 5 in each position. So the most valuable goalkeeper in terms of points per million so far is Sales. And you've got Onana, Pickford, and Sanchez. I would suggest that the points per million for goalkeepers, because there's not a whole lot of difference between goalkeepers' prices. It goes from 4.5 to 5.5 million. You're going to see a similar sort of ranking to total points, but it changes when you get on to defenders. So Ola Aina is the most valuable defender, 10.2 points per million. Murillo, 9.8. Virgil van Dijk and Canate out there as well. I guess that's still to be expected given, Liverpool have been the strongest team defensively by a long margin. And Mbeumo, Smith Rowe, McNeil, Alex Iwobi up there, Rodgers and Luis Diaz are the most valuable midfielders in terms of points per million. Danny Welbeck is the top forward, closely followed by Chris Wood, Liam Delap of Ipswich, Wissa and Cunha. And we got Raul Jimenez and Strand Larsen up there as your top forwards for points per million. So there are 2 bits of data that I'm gonna dive into next. So first up, we've got goals, and I'm gonna extrapolate that. I'm gonna look at goals and then some interesting data around expected goals as well. And I think when you're talking about goals, there's only really 3 positions that are relevant. You're not going to talk about goalkeepers when it comes to scoring goals. So we shrunk that down to 3 positions to look through. We've got defenders, midfielders, and forwards then. So the top, well, you can see there for yourself, there's a load of defenders that have scored 2 goals, and Guardiola and Aït-Nouri on 3. And Mbeumo and Salah joint on 8 goals, Palmer on 7, Diaz on 5, and then a bunch on 4, you can see there. Haaland's got 12 goals, Wood is on 8, Wissa's on 6, Welbeck, Jackson, Delap all on 6, you can see there, some on 5 and 4 as well. So that's your forwards that have actually scored the most goals, put the ball past the goal line. And then also expected goals. I think it's quite interesting to look at expected goals as well. So the top defenders for expected goals are actually quite different to ones that have actually taken their chances and put the ball in the back of the net. So Guardiola was the top defender for goals, total actual goals scored, but he doesn't even appear on the list for accumulating XG. I think that basically just says he's got an incredible shot on him and header basically. Collins of Brentford is actually the top defender in the league for expected goals so far this season. Milenkovic of Nottingham Forest, Gabriel, Munoz of Palace, and Aït-Nouri are up there as the top defenders for expected goals. Mo Salah, Brennan Johnson is actually the 2nd best midfielder in the game for expected goals so far. Cole Palmer's in 3rd, Bruno Fernandes in 4th, and Mbeumo, Gordon, you can see the rest of them there. And then for forwards, Haaland is by far and away the top and almost double the expected goals of any other player in the league. 10.98 expected goals he sits on at the moment. Nicholas Jackson on 5.95, Solanke on 5.45, and then Watkins and Welbeck closely following those 2. Now, beyond just looking at the expected goals, I also think it's worth looking at who has underperformed so far. And I found a really useful website called Statmuse, which, much like Understat, I will link in the description below. And what we've got here, some of these players don't have pictures, but what we've got here is a comparison of their actual goals scored versus the XG and the biggest differences in terms of underperformance this season. The biggest XG underperformers this season, or top 5, we've got Cameron Archer, the Southampton striker, Mitoma of Brighton, he's put up 3 XG, only scored 1. Adama Traore, he's a perpetual player who's going to be doing this, isn't he? I think if anyone's seen Adama Traore play, he is an absolute underperformer of his expected data. Bernardo Silva hasn't scored but accumulated basically 2 XG. Solanke, and of course Bruno Fernandes. So if you've owned any of these players so far, apart from possibly Adama Traore, because you should have known what you're getting, you should count yourself unlucky this season so far. And then you've got overperformers, so players that have put up a low amount of XG but have actually put the ball away a lot more than the XG suggests they should have done. The top players here are quite worrying because it's half of my team basically, and also some of the top performing players in the league so far this season, or at least in the FPL game so far this season. And it might suggest, and then I'll just put a point out there, it might suggest that their overperformance, both underperformance and overperformance, isn't expected to last forever. The whole point of XG is that on a big enough sample size of a long enough set of games, etc., it should even out where goals are pretty level with XG, and then it is really only exceptionally good finishers or exceptionally bad finishers that, you know, under or overperform. But so far this season, Brian Mbeumo is the biggest overperformer, of XG. He's scored 8 goals from only 3.69 XG, so that's nearly double what he's been expected to score. Chris Wood, around the same to be honest, nearly double. 8 goals from only 3.98 XG. Liam Delap has scored 6 from 2.6. Cunha's overperformed as well. Salah has as well. Palmer's up there. Obviously Guardiola, massive overperformance from him. 3 goals from 0.79 XG. Yeah, I just thought it'd be really interesting to look at the under and overperformers of that stat. And finally, we've got expected goals per 90. I think this is quite a useful stat because if there are players that have potentially not played the whole season, expected goals per 90 is something that doesn't take into account how many games they've played. It just takes into account how many minutes per XG, basically, or how many XG they put up per 90 minutes they've played. There aren't really a whole lot of surprises, but one player we didn't see on this list previously was Yoane Wissa, purely because he just hasn't played the volume of games to put up the really high XG. And it's the same with Diogo Jota. Obviously, he spent a bit of time out injured this season as well. And you might be able to pick up some other players here that didn't appear on other lists that are on this one. But I think XG per 90 is something really valuable to look at, because if you're just looking at total XG in isolation, it obviously favours players that have played the most minutes and the most games. And that doesn't necessarily tell the full story. So XG per 90, something useful to look at. Next up, we've got assists. So similar to what I did with goals, here are the top players that have got the most assists in each position. Defenders, there's 4 defenders. We've got 4 defenders on 3 assists. Luca Dean, Collins of Brentford, Ashley Young and Robinson. If you're on 2, you can see there. I won't go through them all in detail. Midfielders, and the top player in the league for assists is Saka. He's got 7. Salah's got 6. Palmer's got 5. You can see there a bunch of players on 4 and 3. And then in terms of the forwards, Antonio leads the way with 4. 3 of those I believe he got in one game. Jackson's on 3. Watkins is on 2. And you can see, well, there's a whole bunch of other players on 2 and 1 assist. So that's your total assists. Expected assists, the top defender is Trent, suggesting early on that he's a bit of an underperformer so far for his expected assists. Leif Davis is up there. Luca Dean, Pedro Porro, Lewis Hall. I think Lewis Hall could be a really good option at his price as well. Maddison is the top midfielder for expected assists, followed by McNeil, Saka, Iwobi, Foden and Savio of Man City. Then you got Cunha, the top forward for expected assists, Raul Jimenez, Havertz, Isak, and then Antonio's up there as well. One thing just to say on this Statmuse data is that the expected data is slightly different to what I've managed to get from Fantasy Premier League themselves. And that's basically because most stats platforms have a different view of what XG and XA is. It's not, I wouldn't say it's so different that it makes this data useless, because otherwise I wouldn't use it. But it is just a little bit different to what you're looking at on the other set of data that I showed. There's no way of fixing that. You know, you just have to, I guess, put up with it. But it's still, I think, regardless of the definition of expected goals, expected assists, etc., I still think this data gives a good view of under or over performance regardless, because, you know, Statmuse are looking at their own definition. I just think it still works, basically. I still find it useful, and I hope you do too. So in terms of underperformers of expected assists so far, Andreas Pereira, Andrew Robertson and Ismail Assar have all put up over 1 expected assist and not gotten an assist, basically. I would say this is probably the least interesting of the performance data against their expected data, because, you know, the highest player here has put up 1.63 expected assists, so it's not all that significant. The overperformance is interesting though, and what I would say is that historically, lots of players overperform their expected assists. That's traditionally what I find. So an overperformance in XG by a little bit is not too much to be concerned about. It is traditional, I think, that most players overperform their XG. But a big overperformance like Saka, for example, or Salah, it either suggests, number one, that they're exceptional passers of a football, which is probably the case in both cases, but also that maybe they are overperforming the data a little bit, and it might peter off towards as we get towards sort of midway to end of the season. Anyway, I just thought it'd be useful to look at the XG overperformers, and we've got Saka as top, Salah second, Wilfred Ndidi, who's got 4 assists, only 1.28 expected assists, Ashley Young, Jadon Sancho, Jan out of Brentford. Those are your expected assists overperformers. Managed to get that out then. And then finally, similar to what we did with the expected goals, we've got the expected assists per 90. So again, this is a really useful thing to take into account because it means that players that have been injured, maybe rotated throughout the season or bought late on or something like that, it means they're all sort of accounted for fairly because it's a stat per 90 minutes rather than per game or in total, I guess. Savio is the best expected assist per 90. 0.47, followed by Phil Foden, Heung-min Son, Kevin De Bruyne, Cole Palmer, and Bukayo Saka. And seeing Salah, Saka, and Palmer on basically all of this list suggests we all know they're good for goals, but they're also really creative players as well. And I think it just proves just how strong they are in this game. Finally, one thing that we didn't speak about already was bonus points in FPL. There is potential in every single game of the Premier League. There are there's 3 points, 2 points, and 1 point. So that's 6 bonus points on offer in each game that's played. So bonus points do play sort of a factor in the game, and it is important to keep track of those players that are doing well for bonus points. Although I would say I don't think there's any real surprises here. Largely, the players that are doing the best for bonus points are the ones that are putting up the most goals and the most assists, or are proving to be the most dangerous. You can see there Van Dijk, Guardiola, Palmer, Salah, and Mbumo, Saka, Haaland, Cunha, Wood. They're all good players in their own right in the game. And I would say, not many people are going to be picking players in FPL purely because they're good for bonus points. But just looking at this kind of data just helps you realise, who might be a difference maker in a decision basically somewhere down the line. So the top defenders, Van Dijk, Trent, Guardiola, Konate, Palmer, Salah, and Mbumo, Saka, and then Haaland, Cunha, Wood, and Jackson for the forwards. This isn't total bonus points, this is BPS. I think this is probably a better metric to look at than total bonus points because this is how many, the bonus points with the bonus point system points. It's difficult to say that they've accumulated across the season. So not necessarily the total bonus points that they've scored, but how highly they rank in terms of chances of getting those maximum bonus points, basically. I think this is a more useful metric to look at because it shows a bit more detail of how, how well these players and how likely they are to get maximum bonus points, I think is what I'm trying to say there. So hopefully that makes sense and you find it useful. All right, and that's the end of the video. I feel like that was an absolute overload of stats and data. So hopefully you could take that all in and find it useful. If there is anything the video is missing for future reference, I'll probably make more of these as the season goes on and we have more international breaks. Let me know in the comments if there's any other bits of data you'd want included. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a like rating. As I said at the start, I think around 75% of people that watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe. If you're not already and you enjoyed the video, hit the button that should be just there on your screen. I think that's everything. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.